Hello, I'm Irene Natividad, President of the Global Summit of Women, which is a business economic forum for women now celebrating its 30th year in 2020. Now, one of the hallmarks of the summit are our skills building sessions, because no matter how much you've achieved, you can always learn something new. And anything that helps women to accelerate their rise in their careers is always helpful. So today we're focusing on developing your personal brand. Now, there's some of you who'll say, what is that? Is that something I need? Yes, you do. And so we have gathered together a great team of experts who will tell you how to create one, how to expand it within your organization, and how do you use social media and the whole digital world in expanding that brand. So let's begin right away. And I want to introduce to you Avril Henry. She's a management consultant who's based in Sydney, Australia. Yes, it's early in the morning for her. And she is a management consultant of long standing, primarily in the leadership development and diversity space. And she brings to this work lots of years as an executive herself in IT, in HR, in finance, in literally 4 continents. She's written lots of books about this, and clearly she's well known. She was named as one of the 100 women of influence by the Australian Financial Review, and then one of the 10 most influential in the whole diversity area. So let me present to you Avril Henry. The floor is yours, Avril.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Irene. And to everybody tuned into this, it is indeed a great honour and privilege to be with you today and to be able to talk to you about something that I think is very, very important for women, and that is developing your personal brand. So I'll take you through a quick series of some points, together with being followed by 2 colleagues, Marianne and Rohini, and then the panel who's going to talk to you. So first slide, which you're about to see, developing your personal brand. The reason this slide's actually important is because this is an example of my brand, because brand is not just about what you say and what you do and your purpose. It's also about the visual impression you create, not just as a person, but when people go to your website, when you use slides in presentations, your business card, all those sorts of things. And so today, as I always do, I'm actually using my brand colours, the orange, the white and the blue, and I'm using images that is part of our brand. Next slide, please. So in essence, a personal brand is what is your story. So who are you? What do you stand for? What is your purpose? Your purpose is your why. And how does your purpose connect to your business? So our purpose, which you will see on the very last slide and you saw on the first slide, is creating transformational leadership. I want to be known for being a person who wants to develop one leader, one team, and one organisation at a time. And those are linked to my values around fairness, equity, and the way we interact with people, trust, credibility, courage, integrity. So work out, what are your personal values? Because when you can connect your personal values to your core and therefore the values of your business, not only will you be authentic and credible, you will be achieving a purpose that gives you enormous satisfaction. So what do you want to be known for? And we want to be known as leaders, and myself specifically, leaders in the space around the development of inclusive leadership, and somebody who wants to build teams where diversity is seen as a strength rather than as a weakness. So your personal brand is your story. Next slide, please. I love this quote from the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who said, "It's what people say about you when you are not in the room." So think about that in the context of what you want to be known for. What do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? And for me, when I think about my brand, it's about somebody who helps develop leaders and in particular works with women. That's our passion in our business, women and young women and women who are now seen as at the end of their careers and absolutely aren't. It's about how we tap into the energy of young women and how we tap into the wisdom of older women. Next slide, please. So when you are creating your authentic, engaging personal brand, can I suggest that the real starting point is be yourself? And, we love this visual because, this is about what makes you unique. Work out who you are. Branding is not about self-promotion. Branding is about identifying who you are and what you want to be known for, because people don't buy a brand. People buy a person. They buy a person who can clearly articulate what it is that they stand for. And who's your audience? In our business, we have made it very much our purpose to work with people in emergency services, in health. We work with people in defence. And interestingly, while we work across all sectors and all industries, whether it's banking and finance, we are most passionate about working with people who make a difference in the lives of people every day, hence emergency services and people in health and education. So who's your audience? Your elevator pitch is how quickly you can actually articulate what it is that you do and what's important to you in less than 2 minutes. And it's like a really good CV. I actually tell people I coach that if you can't tell someone in 3 sentences what your career has been, currently is, and will be, then perhaps you haven't articulated it well enough. So your personal brand, please remember, is both online and in person. And then live your brand and create that positive impact. Next slide, please. Very quickly, have a look at what it is that's important about a brand. What are your core messages? What goals are you trying to achieve? And you're going to hear about online presence later from Marianne. Understand that it's about developing your trustworthiness, creating a network through your contacts, which gives you opportunities. And of course, the more you live your brand, the more authentic you are, the more you create credibility for yourself and your brand. Next slide, please. Some do's and don'ts, and this is really important for women because, can I say, when you look at the column of the don'ts, I have not seen men ever do the don'ts. Knowing your strengths, knowing what your achievements are and being willing to share them and accepting good feedback graciously. Women go, "Oh, I'm not really sure what I'm good at. Oh, you can't talk about what I do because, people will think I'm boasting. It was nothing. I was just lucky." If you're doing that, seriously, you need to go and have a good look in the mirror and talk to yourself about not using negative language. Instead, say, "Thank you. I or we for our team worked really hard on that project." Don't wait to be noticed. Put your hand up for opportunities. It's one of the biggest mistakes women make in every sector, in every country, is waiting to be noticed. Please remember, no one is more interested in your career than you. Not your best friend, not your boss, not your partner, not your husband. No one's more interested in your career than you. So make sure you put your hand up, you ask to be paid fairly, rather than accepting less than what our male colleagues get, and be proud of your achievements. Next slide. Here are some ideas around understanding how you describe yourself. And part of your brand is, can you articulate 5 adjectives, even 3 adjectives that describe you? Language matters. Refer to yourself as adaptable, collaborative. Refer to yourself as driven, innovative, resilient, and dare I say smart. I've never heard a woman say she's smart, but I've heard plenty of men say they are smart. Think of yourself and use the words like strategic and trustworthy, because while the words on the right-hand column are solid words, hardworking, organised, reliable, they don't inspire confidence in being an innovative or collaborative leader. Sympathetic is quite different to empathetic. We want empathy in our makeup. We want to be resilient leaders. So think about how you describe yourself, because here's the thing. Next slide, please. You are your brand. And please think about, what will your legacy be? Because for me, my legacy is making the world a better place for women, because I have 2 daughters, a stepdaughter and a granddaughter, and I don't want them to have the same experiences of discrimination that I have had in my career. And so next slide, please, showing you my brand, creating transformational leadership, one leader, team and organisation at a time, with a huge focus on women. Thank you so much for listening, and back to you, Irene.
Those great tips. I love the do's and don'ts, because I empathize with a lot of those, a lot of those words, and I think that would be a worthy lesson for all of us. So now that you've created your brand, that after you've listened to Avril, let's move into, well, then how do you make others know this within your organization, within the company? So I've invited a seasoned expert. Rohini Anand is considered a thought leader nationally and globally in the space of gender diversity, inclusion, equity, corporate responsibility, you name it, she is an expert in it. For many years, well over a decade, she was Senior Vice President for Corporate Responsibility, as well as Chief Diversity Officer for Sodexo, which is a French company. Because of her leadership, Sodexo's name became synonymous, Sodexo's brand became synonymous with diversity leadership. And that, of course, was synonymous with Rohini Anand. For 11 years, Sodexo was in Diversity Inc.'s top 10 ranking in their top 50 companies that excel in the area of diversity. So that's really quite an achievement. So as you may well imagine, she's received so many awards. So I won't name all of them because it would take too much time. So instead, let me give you Rohini Anand.
Wonderful presentation, Avril. Really appreciate it. And I think there's a lot that, we didn't look at each other's slides, but I think there's so much commonality, and I'm looking forward to the transition. So if we can go to the second slide, please. I would say that if we can go to the next slide, that one of the things that you said really resonated for me. And you said that this is not about self-promotion. This is about, being yourself, being authentic. And I love the do's and don'ts. So if I look at the do's column, I love this particular quote by Marie Curie. She said that we must have perseverance and, above all, confidence in ourselves. As women, we have to be confident in who we are, grounded in who we are, and confident in what we contribute to the organization. We must believe that we are gifted for something and that this thing must be attained. So it's about our uniqueness. It's about our story, and it's about telling that story to the organization. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I think Avril mentioned what branding is, and I'd like to sort of extend that. Within the organization, branding is about your skillful power. It's about your superpower. It's about really being, what do you harness in your strengths, the uniqueness? And what is it about you that's unique that attracts other people to you? It's about relationship building. And it's also about reinventing yourself constantly. So organizations change all the time. And I think you have to change your brand continually to be aligned with and relevant to the organization. So if you think about it today, there's so many things happening in the world around us with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, with the economic downturn. So how are you reinventing yourself to be relevant to your organization during these times? Black Lives Matter is a movement in the US, but it's also a global movement that shows up differently in different parts of the world. So I think the constant reinvention of your brand is extremely authentic because it's not static. So if we go to the next slide, this is a quote from Fast Company. They said that branding is a culmination of qualities or characteristics that make you distinctive. So this is again about your uniqueness and the value that others perceive from you. So it's not about self-promotion. It's about how you can add value to others. It's about building relationships. It's about leaning into who you are and really honing that uniqueness and strength in who you are for the benefit of the organization. So think about how you can benefit, what your strengths are, how they can benefit the organization's business. So if you go to the next slide, these are some of the components that I think are very, very important in branding, particularly as it relates to the organization. So the first is, what do you do for people? Okay, so this is about lifting people up. So if I think about myself, what I do for people and what people remember me for in the organization is that I was a mentor. I cared about people's careers. I lifted them up. I supported them. And that's what people remember. It's how you make them feel, what you do for them. It's also about how do you do it differently? So what are your unique strengths? For me, it's about perseverance and consistency, but it's also about really having the courage to speak up. It's about being authentic. It's about having the courage to speak up, to challenge. It's about being a trusted coach and advisor to senior leaders. And it's about adding value to the business by helping to grow the business by making the connection. So what do you do and how do you do it differently? And finally, how do you make people feel? So for me, it was making people feel like I had their back, that they were supported, that I would help them to be successful. So these are the things that you really need to focus on when you're looking at, what is your brand within the organization? So some of the next slide, please. Some of the things to consider are, how can your personal branding increase your visibility and power in the organization while you're being yourself, while you're being authentic, while you're not self-promoting? And the second question is it possible that your brand is actually impacted by your gender or your culture? And I think Avril mentioned some examples. A woman can say the same thing as a man, and it might be perceived as self-promoting. It might be perceived as, you're just being more assertive than you need to be. Be mindful of that and don't shy away from it, but be mindful of it, file it away to make sure that you're able to address it in a practical way. So I think, it's important to really understand. And also if, your culture dictates it, this is not something you don't really talk about yourself, how can you get around that? And I'll share a couple of strategies in a minute in terms of how you can do that in the organization. But, increase your power and visibility in the organization by not self-promoting, but lifting others up, okay, and adding value to the organization. So what are, next slide, please. What are some of those winning strategies? First is know how others see you. What do people say about you? Avril mentioned, what do people say when you're not in the room? And I think that's what Jeff Bezos said. That's exactly right. But also ask for feedback. And I know that this is not always easy, particularly in some cultures, but there is a way of asking feedback. There's a way of giving feedback in a way that may sometimes be indirect, but read between the lines. There may be a way of giving feedback that, that doesn't, is face saving, and that's okay, but ask for feedback in whatever way is appropriate within your culture context. Understand what motivates others that you interact with. What's in it for them, the within. Develop relationships that can help familiarize you with the organization's culture. Get a mentor, get a sponsor, someone who can integrate you within the organization, but also familiarize you with, how the organization works. Build your network and communicate your brand. And how do you do this in a sort of culturally appropriate way? I think sometimes in some cultures, it's acceptable to have others talk about your brand. So that's what a sponsor can do, is to, talk about you when you're not in the room. Be your advocate. Create an ambitious path. And this is something that I think women need to lean into. Raise your hand, ask for what you want, create an ambitious path, but also know how is that being perceived, because of your gender. How is that impacting? File that away and make sure you use strategies to address that. Build trust and recognition and take time to reflect, renew, and re-energize. Now, if you go to the next slide, this slide simply says that there are many ways of networking. There's no one way, but I think you need to lean into the various ways of networking, because at the end of the day, in the next slide, you'll see that networking is about, connecting with groups that have common interests. And business networking is the process of establishing mutually beneficial relationships. So this is about a give and take. It's not a one-way thing. It's not self-promotion. It's give and take. And there's several ways of networking. On the next slide, you'll see that there is the operational networking, which is about getting things done in an organization. And how do you do that? You identify individuals who can support you, but also those that are roadblocks, and build those connections and relationships with them. Personal networking, it's about exchanging, mentoring, important referrals that are needed for you to get your work done, to get information, and you can participate in a variety of associations to do that. And then strategic networking. In the organization, figure out what the future priorities and challenges are in the organization, and identify stakeholders that can help you to determine how your role and your contributions fit into the overall picture. Important to get all three of these types of networkings right. So on the next slide, you'll see it's important to leverage your networks, mind your mindset. So be intentional, tell the story of your uniqueness in an intentional way. Reallocate your time. So often women will sit at their desk and do their job and do it well, but don't allocate the time for building those relationships, for networking, for building their brand, for getting feedback on their brand. So be intentional about that. Give and take continually. This is not about a one-way street. This is about paying it forward, helping others, being grounded and authentic, and establish connections. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see these are some of the things you can see that will help you to brand your career, the steps that you can take, the role of networking, and then think about someone you think who's very memorable and see what made them unique. And then I would say on the next slide, actually spend some time developing your brand, developing your, what are you most proud of? What differentiates you? How have you impacted the company? How have you added to value? And then what are you passionate about? And the last slide, I would say, the key takeaways for me on the last slide are that brand has a life cycle. So reinvent yourself. I'm retired now from Sodexo. I reinvented my brand. Be aware of the impact of gender and culture in terms of giving feedback, in terms of how you promote your brand, show your ambition. Expand your network, and then authenticity, be grounded, and pay it forward. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Irene.
Thank you for those tips. But it's good to point out, as you said, your brand at 30 is not the same as your brand at 45 and necessarily at 65. It evolves, but there will be, as Abril mentioned, a constant that reflects who you are from the very beginning and reflects your values. So now here we are, many of us working from home, using Zoom constantly. How do we expand that brand? How do we make it known now that we're trapped at home? So of course, the digital world. And who best to talk about that than Marianne Pierce, who is with us today. She created over a 20-year period, a superb platform, conferencing platform that is all online. And her clients have included large financial and investment companies, pharmaceuticals, marketing agencies, you name it. One of the things that I like when reading her bio is that she became the founding advisor to something called Watch Media, which is a Gen Z virtual platform. It's a news program in which they discuss how they're going to change the world going forward to make it more equitable and sustainable. I think that tells you a lot about Marianne. So Marianne, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Irene. Thank you, Irene. It's a real pleasure to be on the other side of the camera. We're usually, behind the scenes and cueing people like yourself, places, people. So I'm going to be talking about your digital self. And I'm going to ask, how many of you have checked your digital self today? And what do I mean by that? It's your online presence, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook, your other social media. How much time do you spend on social media and when do you do it? I like to look at my social media around 5:30 in the morning just to see what's incoming. I rely on it for my news of my industry, a little bit of world politics, following some of the social good causes that I work with. Like we did basically for Watch Media was a social good cause that we did with the Newhouse School of Communications at Syracuse. And to stay current with my colleagues. This is what I do. It's my prep before I even have a cup of coffee in the morning. So, basically, since COVID has shut everything down, social media has been our lifeline to the world and our lifeline to our colleagues. And it really has changed how we network. Basically, we were working very hard to go to Bangkok with Irene and everyone to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Global Summit of Women. And it didn't happen. So I didn't get to exchange that business card with you. I didn't get to introduce you to a colleague of mine during an intermission, nor did I email you, as I promised, the name of my favorite restaurant in New York. Overnight, we entered endless Zoomdom. We became almost our whole presence, our whole business presence has become digital. But one of the many interesting things about Zoom, after you kind of start to learn how to work the Zoom, is a thing called breakouts, when you spontaneously get connected with someone. And I don't know about you, it makes me really excited. It's a spontaneity of really a real life encounter. So I don't give people my business card anymore. I say, why don't you link in with me? And once you've done that, you have given someone a permission to get into your real digital space. Your LinkedIn takes on a whole very, very deep persona of who you are. They can check your work history, what you have written, who you are connected to, what you have liked. And they really get a larger snapshot than I think in a very quick first glance than they would even if, over a cup of coffee. I mean, this is something that's there. So your digital brand, how you present yourself, how you communicate and engage with other people via social media is critically important because it's being really observed. Now, there's two types of networks, and this is something that's very interesting that has been referred to by both Avril and Rahani. There are two types of network. The old network, where we had the handshake, the ones we built up over years, college classmates, people in our industry, people that we basically have handshakes and business cards and Christmas cards with. These are deep networks and they're incredibly valuable. And hopefully we're keeping in touch with them because we're not doing it the more, quote, analog way. Now there's another network that social media will bring you. It's a very broad and shallow network and crosses over countries and crosses over age and demographic. Statistically, a broad and shallow network is where opportunities are to be found. So if you're looking for a new job, if you're looking for a mentor, if you're looking for that missing piece of the business partnership, most likely you will find it in a larger network. So one of the things about using your digital presence and really using social media to network and to be informed and to be connected is to really go out and really spread your wings, cast your net as best you can. So I'm going to show you, talk about a couple of tips about how to really perfect to be your best digital self. So if you would publish the slides, please. Okay, thank you so much. Well, the word for the day is be authentic. I hadn't heard any of our presentations, but I think this is the word. In life, many times women are been told that they need to be this and be that, and we need to be authentic. We deserve to be authentic. But if you're not authentic, it will really, really show in social media. Inauthentic, phony, all of that would really, really come to pass and really show quite significantly. So it's really speaking your own voice. This is very much what both Avril and Rohani were saying. If you have a sense of humor, use it. If you're touched by something, say so. You know, please accentuate the positive. Do not engage in the negative in social media. Be very careful about politics. And always keep thinking, I want to build community. I want to be helpful. I want to, find new ideas and new resources. So operate with tolerance of differences and be very, very, very aware of cancel culture. Now, I should look at my photograph on my LinkedIn because it's not authentic because I've left it natural. So basically, note to self, I need to change my photograph. This is important about how you position your message. You and we point of view. When you're posting on LinkedIn especially, and on Twitter, the voice is very important. Please try to change the I to the you or the we. The reader loves the word you. When I was a junior copywriter at Wonderment, which basically started direct marketing, we were taught to start a letter. Dear friend, have you ever wondered? You're basically entering their world, solving their problem, building trust while building community. So this is very important to consider as you go forward. Recently this year, I was awarded, I was named the top 20 trendsetters by Meetings Today's magazine. And I get really nervous about, I don't like to draw attention to myself that way, but they were posting it on social media. So I had to say something. But what I did was I turned it around. I made it about our team. I made it about the MAP Digital team that on a dime turned from doing on-site events to doing virtual-only events in the space of a day and continued serving our clients. So it was one for the team, just that as much we you can get in there. What happened is that it kind of exploded. People who had never liked, people who were influencers, not only liked, but they made comments. So that was really rewarded by being that empathetic and being more expansive beyond your own self view of life. The other thing is to be generous, to play it forward. I think this is one thing we've learned, especially in the COVID lockdown, that it's really very important that you use your expertise to make better for other people. And the story that I can tell is that a lot of these ideas that I'm talking to you about now was written by a woman called Kelly Hoey, who has a book called Build Your Dream Network. And I interviewed her right after the book was published. And I've lifted a couple of her ideas, so I'm giving fair credit there to Kelly. She, after I interviewed her, and it went very, very well, she direct messaged me, which in Twitter is like, privately, sent a message to me. She says, I want you to call this woman in Dublin. She has a conference that she needs to generate more American attendees. I want you to see if you can help her. I said, okay, let's give it a try. Well, within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, I was arranging for a New York salon. And we put it on our platform, which we do webcasting, and we captured all the content. And then we did something interesting. we took those speakers, their thought leadership, that wonderful moment when they said something incredibly significant, and we just spread it out over Twitter and carried InspireFest, the name of the company, the conference is InspireFest, and the speakers brand, and we were building community. We were trending in New York City. We had some great coverage in Chicago. We were doing very well in the British Isles, Australia, India. So by spreading other people's thought leadership, by using social media for what it's really good for, we were helping making brand and helping build community all around this conference, which is dedicated for promoting women and girls in STEM. So it was a very, very interesting and very significant experience. So in many ways, it's by doing good, being generous, and paying forward, you create amazing amounts of influences and amazing amounts of just revenue sometimes. I mean, we talk about data in a minute. So you build this global network by using the social media for amplifying other people's thought leadership and amplifying ideas. And the interesting thing about doing this and doing it for pro bono is I learned a lot of things that I could take back to my corporate clients who said, you know, we did this for this not-for-profit and we did this for other organizations, and here's what we learned. So another tick of what we did was by doing good, we did well. And so not only did we help an organization, we also had case studies and data analytics in which to show our clients that, you know, this is something that we can explore and move forward. So when it comes to social media, you should get in the practice of posting at least once a week, whether it's a like, whether it's a comment. If you have a blog, it doesn't have to be 20 paragraphs. It can be 4 paragraphs. Just get your muscle moving about sharing thought leadership. You know, maybe start by liking. When you like someone's comment, do more than that. Read the article, quote the article, make a comment. Again, pay it forward. It's very interesting also when you talk about LinkedIn, which is really the business platform, which is most useful for building your networks. LinkedIn, basically, its algorithm will look at the first sentence or two, and will use that in which to amplify or to spread your content out there. So be very journalistic with the who, what, when, where, why. Also, hashtags are very important. LinkedIn only takes the first 3 hashtags, so choose them well because that will help carry your message forward. And Twitter is also a good source of building networks and getting thought leadership out there. It's almost like an adjunct and a support to LinkedIn. So anyway, as you move forward, that you should look at Twitter as a source, especially for video. And if you do post a video, it has to be around 2 minutes, and make sure you have subtitles because most people watch videos with the sound off. So that's great. And, you know, your network informs your brand. So when you start getting into more of a digital image, a digital self, who your network is starts to lift your brand also. And then you start surrounding yourself with fellow influencers. So it really has a win-win combination that happens. Okay, I need to conclude now. Thank you so very much, but I do want to show you, if you just hit the next slide, please. This is an example of a really good social media content. A woman named Anne O'Leary, who's the CEO of Vodafone. And what she's done is she's built her digital brand over many different platforms. She promotes in Ireland, basically, for abused women, as well as the digital divide, as well as football. So she's authentic and she's clear, and she works the social media quite well while still being a very well-renowned CEO. So thank you very much.
And you are a trendsetter, by the way. And we also know she's authentic. But thank you for all those tips. We could always use new ways of using the social media that all of us are on. So thank you to you, to Avril and Rohini for a great set of presentations. Okay, now I'm going to introduce to you a group of business leaders to react to what has just been presented from different countries. So let me begin with Nora Villafuerte Garza. She is Vice President for Human Resources in Nestle Mexico. And she brought to that position 30 years of working in the HR space in several multinationals, you know, from Chubb to Parker Hannifin to American Express to Banamex, Bank of Mexico, and now, of course, at Nestle. She is well known in Mexico for being a thought leader, and she was named as one of the top 50 business women in Mexico, very influential. One of the things I wanted to point out is under her leadership, she managed to somehow make leave policy for adoptive mothers, which sort of expands maternity leave, which I thought was amazing. And she did that both for American Express and Banamex. And for Nestle, she was able to put in place 6 months maternity leave, which is actually quite a bit. So that is Nora, and clearly she will bring to us a great deal of experience. Next, I would like to introduce you to Armelle Carminati from France. Armelle, is she there? Armelle is the CEO and founder of Axit Invest, which is a venture capital fund for enterprises that have social impact. I actually knew her when she was CEO of Human Capital and Diversity at Accenture for many years. And then she got headhunted to Unibail-Rodamco, which is a leading commercial property company that's publicly listed in France. And she brings, therefore, to this discussion a great deal of management experience, which was not lost on MEDEF, which is a leading French employers company, and they've asked her to chair their social and management innovation commission. So welcome, Armelle. And last we have Ana Munoz. Ana is from Spain, and she is a board director in 3 companies, 2 privately held companies and 1 publicly listed. And she is also an angel investor, also mentoring, like Armelle, entrepreneurs. She spent 17 years at Merrill Lynch. And so, of course, that is an experience that's much valued by the boards that she is on. She has so many honors, so we won't even waste time on that because I want to get to the discussion. So nice to have all of you on board. And Nora, my condolences on losing your sister this weekend. That is not an easy thing to go through, and thank you for being here with us despite that. So my question to all 3 of you is, you've all managed lots of people in your many years, women and men. And so do you think there's value in creating your personal brand? Do you think, let me put it another way, what are the consequences of not having a personal brand? Anybody? Armelle?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, branding is a term I surfaced very lately in my career. To be totally transparent, my origins are very modest. I wasn't even born in Paris, which does make a great difference in France when you're not in Paris. And I discovered branding once I was a leader. And the reason why I started working on that matter is not building a brand for oneself, but I found my path in building a brand for a cause. Not even for values, but for a cause. And this is how I discovered that it could create an umbrella much larger than yourself in order to endorse and in order to lead more people, to protect your project. To give an example, when I was leading diversity, first of all in my own country and then more largely at Accenture, I discovered that speaking outside, speaking to the media, creating a halo about what I was doing was rendering good service to the cause, and as well was building a shield so that in good times or in adverse times economically, that type of initiative and project was always protected because of the aura and respectability and legitimacy outside.
So it was like insurance.
Yes.
Your
It's
brand
like
provided a kind of insurance
shield.
because now you were known as this, this, and this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, no one can alter your space when your space is known outside.
I got
And the second aspect of it is that if you run for a cause, even if it's about taking a risk, it does survive every type of career steps. I can give you an example, and my cause was about women progress, women progression, and women career. I decided to resign from big corporate roles 5 years ago. But this year, 5 years later, and I'm not running any big company, not even a small company, I'm a business angel now. 5 years later, I'm called by the government to work on gender balance. 5 years later, I'm now nominated among the 40 most inspirational women in France. And I'm out of corporation. So running for a cause, even a difficult one, is something very strong if it does really express your deep, profound values. And it does fly over years and fly over borders,
Wonderful.
even corporate borders.
All right. What about either one of you, Anna or Nora?
Yeah, I was going to come from another angle and say two things. One is something I learned very early in my career, in those early years at Merrill Lynch. And it was one of my bosses who told me, Anna, remember one thing, perception is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true, perception is reality. So if you don't work on your brand, that perception is out of your control, and that will be reality, which is why you need to work on your brand, and it's absolutely necessary. And then I want to say something controversial to the three wonderful ladies we heard before. And it is, what's wrong with self-promotion? Why are the three of them saying this is not self-promotion? So I checked while I was listening, I checked on Google in case it's because in English it sounds bad. And no, Google, 5 different definitions told me self-promotion can be magnetic, can be great, and go for it. So in all honesty, I think a bit of self-promotion is great and it should be part of your brand.
Okay, Nora.
Hello, Irene, and thank you for your words. In general, I was thinking when you invited me to discuss on this panel, what do I believe from the Latin point of view about self-promotion, about branding, is that unfortunately in Mexico and other Latin American countries, we are not at the level of talking about branding. We have like two different worlds. The world of the multinationals, global companies, such as the one I belong now and belong before, and the rest of the country. So we are much more on the level of defending more basic rights, such as, workload or pay or equal pay. So yes, I am totally on that we have to promote ourselves. I do agree with my colleagues that self-promotion is very important. But here, if I were to be honest, I think that we are still on a level of, on a different level, to tell you the truth. I do believe that we are much more on the side of trying to build networks, personal networks, trying to create like a power map and try to get in contact with them. But when I hear about, things like digital promotion or creating a page or a self-branding. I haven't seen that in Latin countries, to tell you the truth.
Well, this leads me to my next question, which has to do with did the advice that you've heard work in the corporate culture in which you're in? And basically, Nora, you're saying that's very difficult to do. But would it be wrong to teach women what you've heard? To, in other words, to give women the skills about creating their reputations instead of professional reputations, instead of that being made for you by other people through rumors?
No. I do agree that it's very important to teach women. If you were asking me, what should I do or how can I help? I can give you, for instance, as my colleagues were saying, we are defending a cause in Nestle, which is called youth. We are all for youth, and we are trying to create employability and vocational orientation to women and men, youth, very young people. But in Mexico, and I could say the same for most of the other Latin countries, the macho culture is still very embedded. So unfortunately, it is not well seen for a woman to promote herself. So we have to use subtle ways to do it. So yes, I think that the thing that we should do, and we should move forward, is towards teach them how to brand themselves in a way that is not perceived in an ill manner. No. So yes, I do believe that the first thing to do is teaching them how to do it and how important it is for them to do it.
Instead of somebody doing it for them, and it's the wrong image. Mm-hmm. So Ana, Spanish culture, less macho than Mexican? I don't think so.
No, I was listening to Nora, and in fact, I think that's where we come from. Very similar story, but I would say we've moved forward very, very quickly recently. So much so that now we have super good role models, very senior women that are out there and show their whole power every day. Like, one example that comes to my mind is Ana Botín, who is the chairwoman of Banco Santander. And not only she is the chairwoman, but her image and her communication is absolutely great. Check her out because it's really worth seeing. So yeah, I mean, we come from the same culture as Nora, as Mexico, but I think things move very quickly in the virtual world. And so much so that I was going to add something else, and it is, I think sometimes now, based on what Avril was saying before, the mentoring has to be reversed. So there are young women in Spain who can teach me a lot about how to be more effective on social media, how to use Twitter, how to, those videos they all love, that God knows why they love them so much. So I would say taking advantage of the energy coming from the younger women generation to teach them the important things, but let them teach us what we have to do on social media, because they're a lot more, I would say, knowledgeable than we are in general.
Let me tell you, you're not alone. The young women in this office teach me all the time because I don't know a lot. But yes, reverse mentoring. But are there, in Spain, is personal branding talked about? Is this something that's taught as a skill that one must learn?
It's starting to be a subject, and it's starting to be, say, in the business schools and even in the press. Yes, it is. That's why I said self-promotion, I think, is not a bad thing when you really have to push it. But I agree that it should be done a lot more, and that we all have to help to do it and to speak about it and to mentor the way we can to get more done. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's a lot more visible now, and it's a subject that many people have in their mind, in the executive, in the business world, but also in general networks. Yeah.
Armelle, French companies. I don't think they're any less macho either.
Well, I would not take that angle. It's even a larger problem than being a male or a female in this country. France is about liberté, égalité, fraternité. The three big names that express who we are. And égalité, on the positive side, is a really ambitious term about, equal opportunities and things. But the dark side of égalité is that no one is allowed to step up. No one is allowed to have more shine or more halo. Equal means level down. This type of culture is a culture where we hate winners, and we have a sad passion for the ones who finished number 2. Those are the names we remember and glorify. And this is why, branding, which and all the Anglo-Saxon terms about self-promotion are not disregarded in big corporations because there is international influence, but taken cautiously. And this is why I tried early on to address one path in triggering the appetite towards building a brand that I find is working for many women in France. It's about, don't do it for yourself, do it for the cause, do it for your project. If you don't do it for your project, if you're not known, your project is ignored. If your success is not known, your team is ignored. And that's devastating as a sentiment for any woman. And this is usually the initial starter for many women in my country to get started and reassemble the courage to get started for others. And when others is not a team, others is a cause. And this type of vehicle is the way in driving and focusing energy to stand up and to shine and be bold.
Well, American culture is all about winning.
Yes, I know.
And who doesn't want to win?
In the international description, sometimes we hear that the US have male values and France has female values.
So US has male values?
Yes.
Avril has a question. Can we bring her up? Avril Henry. Yes. Go ahead, Avril.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the wonderful speakers on my panel, but also to the amazing 3 of you in Mexico, Spain, and France. I think what I should have done, and thank you for helping me to improve my presentation for next time, what I should have said is beware shameless self-promotion. And to me, shameless self-promotion is when there's no substance to your achievements and what you're talking about. So, Marianne, I'm just for 1 minute going to 1 second digress for politics. So think Trump. Shameless self-promotion and no substance and no truth to it. What I think women have to get better at is self-promoting their strengths and their achievements and actually telling people, rather than saying we did this, we did that, would be to say, when I worked at Merrill Lynch, I was responsible for introducing paid maternity leave in the region. So factually sharing your achievements rather than talking about you, the person, and I think Trump has given us wonderful examples of how not to self-promote, when he says, I'm the best president ever, I did this, I did that, and there's no substance to it. So to me, that's what I call shameless self-promotion with no substance. Whereas when we talk about what we've actually achieved and what our strengths are, people will then see us in not only our authentic selves, but what it does is it builds our credibility, which Mela spoke about so eloquently. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Avril. Rohini has a comment as well. So Rohini, come on.
I'm just being unmuted. So this is wonderful. I think this was a great conversation, great points that were raised, and thank you for that. So I think just to build on the self-promotion piece, I think one of the things that's really important to keep in mind from an organizational perspective is whether you're a man or a woman, you have to have the emotional intelligence to understand the organizational culture. And I think Armelle mentioned that and gave a really good example there. So in her experience, the way to address her brand was to basically build her brand around a cause in a French company, a French organization. I would say it's the same for me. That's how I did it. I worked for a French company, and that's how I built my brand within the organization. So the point is, whether you're a man or a woman, you have to calibrate how you build your brand to the culture of the organization, and that takes emotional intelligence. So it's not about not self-promoting, but it's about how you do it that makes the difference. So I think that's, calibrating is critical. So the culture of the country, yes, but I think to me, it's the culture of the organization in terms of what will be successful. The end result is you are self-promoting, but how you get there, the journey to that is what's critical.
Thank you, Rohini. That's a very, very good point. And I think we need another session on the how part of
Exactly.
how you promote your virtues and your value. So one quick last question having to do with social media that Marianne Pierce spent so much time about, and in which many people are now spending a lot of time in. Do you three use it? And do you think social media is a plus or a minus? Or both?
Absolutely.
In terms of, building your professional reputation,
I think
personal brand.
Social media is like a huge jungle, and you have to find your way through it and ignore the noise, because there's a lot of noise in there. And if you get lost in the noise, I don't think you find your way back, or you won't have it easily. But I think if you use it the right way, like Marianne was saying before, it can be a great way of transmitting ideas. The blogs are great. I use it all the time, not at 5:30 in the morning, God forbid, I'm Spanish, but I do use it every day, and I professionally and also for friends. And again, you have to understand what is social media for your friends versus what is social media for your brand. And
some people don't know how to divide the two.
And that's very important.
Nora.
I just want to add one thing of what Rihanna mentioned. Rahini, I'm sorry.
Rahini.
I mentioned just a minute ago, which is, yes, one of the things that we are working today in Mexico in this project that I mentioned, which is my great passion, youth, is emotional intelligence. And you have to understand, and I do agree completely with her, that it all depends on the type of company that you're working for and the environment that you have. So it's much more accepted to say, my team did this rather than I did this. In cultures like Mexico, in order to protect yourself from the rest. And on the social media side, I am not a fan of social media, to tell you the truth. However, I use it for the promotion of this project because, as Anna was saying, it's much more easier to promote for a cause rather from a person, for a person.
Yep, always. And last word to Armelle.
Well, I would echo what Anna said. You have to be very careful and selective and find the space that echoes what you want to achieve and avoid others. Because I'm running for a cause, as I told you, I tend to find LinkedIn very boring, where you portray yourself idealistically and very statically. Because I like to exchange opinions, I prefer Twitter. And as far as lockdown has changed or not my way of doing it, I found myself at the very beginning very active on social media because feeling connected less. But going forward, it does burn so much digital time that I reopened the second lockdown far more cautious and far more remote from social media. And I'd rather select one than spread myself on multiple ones. In other terms, as opposed to the Irish CEO, I can't remember her name, who was promoted by Marianne with an ideal social platform or multiple network. I would say if you're not in that type of position with a big team, a communication team, and a private cabinet and private assistants you don't have the strength and you don't have the arms to embrace everything at the same time. So be selective, actively selective.
Great advice from all of you and from our presenters initially. Thank you all for being part of this great discussion. I wish we could continue because it's wonderful. And thank you to Avril and Rohini and to Marianne Pierce for giving us the gift of their expertise as well as their time. Thank you to all of you who have joined us. And if there's some of you who may have missed part of this, we're going to show this again. So until next time, the Global Summit of Women says goodbye, and we will see you again. Thank you.